Hello and welcome to the pods live. This is the third day of the draft. We're coming to you after, and so we're going to go through today's picks that took quite a while for the Dolphins to make um, because of all the trades. So we'll also talk about all the trades, kind of what we think that means, and how they got slaughtered in them. And then this is the fun time when all the undrafted free agents news comes out. So we'll be checking any patriotsdraft.com, which is probably the best site for keeping up with it. Maybe a Patriots site, but they do a really good job of kind of getting everything reported. They will get the odd thing wrong, so don't take anything kind of as sacred, but generally it's agents, sometimes they'll negotiate stuff through the media with this. But so we'll kind of check in with that every once in a while and see how kind of the roster's panning out. So I have a pretty good idea of how the roster will look for next week's OTAs. But I'm joined by Ian Wharton as normal, who you can follow at Bleacher Report, draftcentric.weebly.com, and his Twitter at NFL Film Study. You can follow the show at MiamiPod, themiamipod.com, iTunes, Stitcher, and Podbean, and all these 3 days of draft coverage will be up around Monday evening. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to live, or you want to spend even more of your life listening to us, you can do again there. But first, maybe should we talk about the first trade, and then we can talk about the subsequent trades. But for me, the trade with the Patriots, I guess maybe because the Patriots traded after, you could maybe take it as the Dolphins didn't want any future assets, even though they were more valuable, because they wanted players now. So then maybe they kind of brokered the deal to get the Patriots involved or something, or they just didn't really have anyone with draftable grades. And so then they just wanted to get as many priority free agents. There's kind of a misconception that teams are going to have a grade on every player. Like some teams will just have 140 players graded out. So if the Dolphins came into this day and they had like 5 people with draftable grades, then that would be a reason to move down and get like the 5, 6, and 7th round picks, and just look for priority free agents. So that's kind of my take on that move. Have you got any other thoughts other than just like losing a really good opportunity to recoup some of the draft capital that they lost yesterday?
I thought obviously the better deal was done by New England. Although I didn't mind the moving down, like the actual act of moving down was wise. I thought that obviously the more assets, the better, especially at that point in the draft. And we'll get into the guys that they ended up taking, but it was disappointing that they weren't able to get that 4th round pick. And some people have asked, well, that's only a difference of about 10 picks between the 5th round this year and the late 2nd or late 4th, which will be the Seahawks likely next year. Well, that may be true. It could end up that way. However, it may not end up that way. What happens if the Seahawks have a down year? Someone gets hurt. Russell Wilson gets hurt. Knocking on wood as I say that. I hope he doesn't. But there's unknown quantity with that pick, which is very valuable. It could become a great asset. And also, if you look at the hit rates on picks that are in the 4th round compared to anything after that, it's a much higher chance that it's going to hit there in the 4th round. So just statistically speaking, it is more valuable because you're more likely to get a quality player, even if it is a 10-pick difference. But I don't hate the fact that they traded down. I actually like that. It might have actually been one of my favorite parts of today for the Dolphins draft.
And then if we move on to the next trade, which I guess was the Jamar Taylor trade, or was there a trade before that? They traded up again, didn't they, at first? Or was that the Jamar Taylor trade?
I believe they did trade up.
Okay. Well, the Jamar Taylor trade had a trade up involved, so they basically moved up like 15 or so spots With the pick, they ended up picking Brandon Doherty, the quarterback. To me, I think it was another kind of flawed trade where you basically gave up the least amount you could. And really, with a player of, like, I think Jamal Taylor has still got some talent. I'd much rather have cut him at the end of training camp and see how he looks in a new scheme with new coaching than just give him up for pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
So I think that was a pretty big misstep by them.
Yeah.
And it's rare that obviously it's the new analytical Browns, but to get, like, you got less value out of him than Will Davis, and he played far better than Will Davis.
Yeah, and he had a clear role in the defense, and it's just disappointing. I mean, I think Miami's been down this road, and I will say I don't think athletically he is the same guy that he was coming out of college, whether that's due to injuries or whatever it may be. But I wasn't a fan of that. I mean, it's a unit that needs help, and you didn't address that unit too much until, besides Jordan Lucas, who now you're starting the clock on all over again. And I don't think that you upgraded that position, and that was a position of weakness. So, I mean, obviously Xavier Howard's in there, but he's playing a different position than Jamar Taylor would. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Or maybe they just see Efo and Bobby McCain as the nickel, so we're just going to see kind of smaller nickel corners and then bigger on the perimeter. But I mean, Jamar Taylor wasn't small either. There's this kind of I've seen a couple of people saying, like, Jamar Taylor clearly didn't fit what they like. I mean, he's like half an inch smaller than Howard, so it's not particularly any difference. But anyway, is there any other trade? I can't remember if there was any more trades. Probably was, but we traded with the Vikings as well. I think we gave up a 7th round pick to move up about 10 spots in the late 6th. So the Vikings did some pretty good work acquiring picks from the Dolphins this week and next year. But fun. We didn't really talk about the Vikings trades. It turns out we didn't really talk about how the trades would actually work. I think it's for both the 3rd and 4th round. If they get a comp pick, it would be the comp pick going. If they don't get a comp pick, then it's the Dolphins pick going. So it's kind of similar to almost like an NBA trade where it's like range protected.
Yeah,
which is kind of interesting. And so trust the Dolphins, the 1st, 2nd, you can trade a future pick. They do. But is there anything else you wanted to talk about in terms of trades, or should we get on to the first player picked?
Yeah, I mean, I was disappointed that Jamar Taylor was traded, but overall, I mean, the trades today weren't too bad, I guess.
And it's interesting that, like, most of the fans, I think, have given up on Jamar Taylor, which is, I think, a bit too early. Like we see all the time, like, corner is one of the hardest positions to get good at early, and Jamar had issues of being hurt for a lot of the beginning of his career, so that's not going to help as well.
Right.
But we'll move on to Jakeem Grant, who was the 1st selection for the Dolphins after quite a while of waiting, a couple of hours. A really odd pick in terms of you just draft Kenyon Drake, where we thought his most value early on would be as a returner, and then you draft a guy whose main value is as a returner for me.
Also at a time where return game is literally the least valuable as it ever has been.
Kick returns, like, if you're telling anyone to take it out of the kick return with the rule change, you need to fire that coach.
Yeah.
So it's just going to be punt returns. So it's half the value. And then in terms of, I mean, and let's first talk about him as a returner. Like, he is pretty, like, Sproles-like, the way in which he moves and kind of darts about. So that's kind of fun. And
To me he's a much better return man than Drake. Drake only had 19 career returns. So even like the thought that he's some return specialist is
he's just better
misguided.
than Landry was my kind of, yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and you're right.
And we were just
Now
trying to eke
Grant,
out of like as much value out of that pick as possible because
exactly.
as a runner, it's limited.
So now he's return man 2 on the roster.
Yeah.
And Jakeem Grant. I mean, I actually like the Grant pickup, even though I'm not a big fan of like sub package players. Just far more often than not, they don't end up being anything. There's a reason why there's only one comp that people look at with these little shifty players. Everyone looks at Darren Sproles. Well, that's about it. Like everyone else flames out because it's really hard to force and manufacture touches for these players.
And that's because Sean Payton doesn't think of it as a sub package. He thinks it as a feature of the offense.
Yes.
And so
that's very unique. Like, no one else does that at that type of level.
Yeah. So that's why players like Tavon Austin you'll create gimmick plays instead of creating plays that are beneficial to them and like stress the defense in a certain way. Gimmick plays don't stress the defense in a certain way. They just give defenses extra plays to like rep against, but they don't really put you in binds of certain situations. Whereas Sean Payton does that. He uses mismatches in a very and spends a lot of time on working on them. So if we see that, then maybe that's useful. He's a very limited route runner and got pretty he's not going to be a Stills-like player where it's going to offer much vertically, even with his speed. He's got basically no catch radius. So I think, but Gates loves screens, so I think he's going to be kind of one of the, maybe that's going to be his use as just kind of like a screen player.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were Bears games where there were just so many screens, so
which
he could be on the field a lot.
Yeah, and that might be like my biggest maybe negative on Gase's offense is that he gets really screen happy. But the Chicago situation is really unique because of how little talent they had due to injuries. And then in Denver, it made a lot of sense because that's really where Demaryius Thomas does all of his damage, is after the catch on screens. So whether he continues to use that or not, I would have to imagine he will, just because he's done it in both places. And these moves would also indicate that he's going to continue to use screens, get the ball in the hands of playmakers quickly. We'll see. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of that aspect, but I do think there's a place for it.
So we've got our first reported UDFA in, and there's another corner, Lafayette Pitts from Pittsburgh. I think a while ago he was being tipped to go like in the 3rd round by like NFL.com. I'm pretty sure had something like that on him. And he played a lot for Pittsburgh, I think like 4 years. I think he's like on the edge of 6 foot. So kind of like around the Jamar Taylor size. So maybe that's kind of interesting. Maybe that was one. Maybe we're going to just see like a bunch of corners come in and try and compete with the likes of Tony Lippett and Jordan Lucas, who I guess is there anything else on Jakeem Grant you want to touch on, or should we move on to Lucas?
I mean, I thought the value was fine as far as, was he like 6th or 7th round pick?
6th.
6th round pick. Yeah. I mean, that's fine. He's fun. Yeah. He is really fun. So maybe
he's just going to be like how much he can take a handle, a beating, and whether he can catch balls.
Yeah, because if he can, that's the big question right there. Because if you can do more than screens with him, or putting him in the backfield to again manufacture touches, if you can actually run like out patterns with him or slant
and not
routes,
just speed outs.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Like if you can run a few different things with him, then he could be a really good value. The issue is it's so difficult to do that, to manufacture those touches for most of these players. So, I mean, I'm good with him. I thought it was a fine pick. It was a redundant pick with Kenyon Drake, but I actually like him better than Kenyon Drake for the role as far as special teamer. Now, obviously, Drake is a runner, so that's what you really now need Kenyon Drake to be like a really good running back. Like he needs to be like a solid second running back now.
or Jay he just needs to go
Or just
ham
be
and never let him on the field.
yeah.
So like Jay he could be a legitimate fantasy option. This is basically the perfect draft for him. It's like get someone who's very little competition in terms of the runner, and like Jay he is as good a pass catcher as like I guess the only issue with Vijay is pass pro. But then we may just see if you can negate that with Tannehill's ability to run. You can use zone read to kind of not have to use a running back in pass pro because just the mesh point holds that edge defender, keeping them blocked. Yeah, it'll be interesting. At least we have like a returner for the first time in a while. That isn't like as like Landry had good returns, but then just some awful decision making doing it. So just a more experienced returner that's going to kind of help, and then can create some like electric plays that can maybe change games. I just think his impact. We haven't really talked about where he'll line up. He's just a slot corner. That's all. A slot wide receiver. That's all he played in college, pretty much. I think it was pretty much slot or in the backfield, and they really didn't have him run many routes. It was all kind of very short stuff. Just get the ball into his hand quickly. So don't expect kind of like him to be replacing Kenny Stills. That's not really what he's going to be picked for. But we'll move on to Jordan Lucas, who was also the 29th pick in the 6th round. He played 2 years corner. I saw him live against Central Florida when he was playing corner. And last year he played safety. But when he played safety, he would come down to be nickel corner as well at times. So he offers versatility in at least 3 levels. I guess what I like about him is his lower body in particular. I think he's pretty smooth, has good change of direction. Like his speed isn't great, and he's not the most instinctual player. So those are, I guess, the issues for him in terms of like his athletic makeup. He was a little bit hurt last year. I know some people think he's a better safety than a corner. It sounds like the Dolphins are going to be looking at moving him back to corner, which personally I prefer him as corner. But I think maybe as just kind of like a big slot corner, as we're seeing more teams go to big slots receivers. But what's your thoughts on Jordan Lucas? I know you're not as fond of him as me. And I thought it was, I mean, this is about where I had him as a 7th rounder. So the end of the 6th is pretty much that.
Yeah, no, I had him probably in like that same range. I agree. I think he's probably a little bit better of a cornerback prospect than a safety prospect. I didn't think he was anything really special. And if I'm looking at him and saying, well, is he going to make the roster? Because really that's what we have to kind of consider with these picks. Last year, Miami cut a 5th rounder, Cedric Thompson, and you let him go for nothing. So it was a wasted pick, really. Is Jordan Lucas good enough to make the roster? I don't know if he is.
Who like EFO, and we don't know about injuries with him.
It kind of
think they would take on. They'd probably keep 6 corners just because of the youth at the position. So you're thinking Maxwell, Howard, Bobby McCain, EFO, Lucas, Lippett is your 6. And then maybe EFO doesn't make it, maybe Lippett doesn't make it. It's Lippett and Lucas battle it out.
Yeah, and it depends on where you want these guys to line up. So which ones do you view as slot options? Which ones do you view as boundary only?
And so that's why like the versatility of playing nickel, being able to play boundary, being able to play safety. And he like ticks the Parcells thing of like 3-year captain and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he was made like a captain straight away because he was one of the few guys to go to Penn State with Bill O'Brien.
It'll be interesting to see because I think this is going to be – I think the guy that he puts the most pressure on the roster is probably Lippett.
Yeah.
So now you're saying, did you waste another 5th-round pick last year? We'll see. I mean, I didn't hate it. I mean, again, I'm not going to hate late day 3 picks. I mean, are there guys I prefer? Yeah, probably. I don't dislike this, though. The secondary needed someone else. They're going to continue to add a couple UDFAs here soon, I'm sure, in the free agency. Hopefully they get Mike Jordan. That'd be the guy I want them to get. I think Jordan's a better player than Lucas, but similar type of players. So, I mean, I don't dislike it. I mean, if I were to grade it, I'd give it like a C. It's fine. It's average.
And with the Dolphins really having no one at corner other than Maxwell, and you're hoping that Maxwell plays like he did 3 years ago. Like, he wasn't good his last year in Seahawks. There's kind of people think, oh, he was good with the Seahawks. He was good sometimes with the Seahawks.
I didn't think he was bad. I thought he was pretty average.
Yeah. No, I think he was like average, but that's like,
yeah,
for your best corner to be average and then the rest be second-year players.
Yeah.
So that's probably a position where you want to have a lot of bodies and like see over the year who develops. And so I could imagine them taking 6 corners, and then even if you're thinking of cross-training Akins as well, then you've got like 7 guys that can play corner, and you try and work out who can play. Any other thoughts on Lucas?
No, it was okay pick, yeah. Okay.
Move on to Brandon Doherty, the Western Kentucky quarterback who ended up being who they traded up for in the Jamar Taylor trade. I kind of like him, but like him as in like he was kind of a fun college quarterback to watch. In terms of an NFL projection, he really struggles when there's any pressure, and that's only going to get worse in the NFL and with the Dolphins' interior line, regardless of the additions they've made. Like, O-lines always lose in the NFL most of the time. And then he doesn't really have a great arm either, doesn't have, I guess, like the best size, best athleticism. He's just kind of like a competent backup, but then you've paid Matt Moore. They've kind of paid Logan Thomas, or like give him some assurances that he'll be batting for a second job. You've got Zach Dysert to like help teach the offense. So that's kind of interesting. I don't really see that he's got much chance of making the roster.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of this. I had him. I know some people did like him. He's an accurate quarterback. He has one of the weakest arms that you'll usually see out of a prospect. And I think that's going to really what cost him, along with the...
It's worse than Fales was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it is. I mean, he's a really bad, like, anything past like 12 to 15 yards is a struggle.
Which is a shame because he makes some pretty good reads.
And Fales was the same way. Like, if you were to give him like Carson Wentz's body, and really just his arm strength, or even just Connor Cook, if you gave him an average arm like Connor Cook, he'd be a heck of a prospect. So it's hard to overcome that in the NFL because the windows are so small. Chad Pennington's really probably the only quarterback I can think of with that weak of an arm to actually have any success in the NFL.
He had a stronger arm first, and then it got worse after injuries.
Yeah, the injuries and surgeries, and so he probably is a practice squad guy, a camp arm that if someone gets hurt, I mean, I would love to sit here and say that he's going to replace Matt Moore. I just don't see it. I don't think he has that baseline NFL talent. I had him as a like a 7th round UDFA pick. So, I mean, he went to the right range. If you were going to take a backup, I think you should have taken like a higher upside guy like Vernon Adams, but obviously the NFL really doesn't like him, which isn't a surprise considering his size. But I thought this is probably a little bit of a wasted pick.
And it's just, I know people didn't like Logan Thomas coming out, but at least he has like the tools to play with.
It gives you a chance.
Yeah. Whereas
what you need with these late round picks is you need a chance.
Yeah.
I was actually kind of disappointed. I was hoping Travis Feeney, the outside linebacker from Washington, was going to fall. He went a couple picks before Miami, but to the Steelers. But that's what I was kind of hoping for there.
There's like some interesting players still around, like Eric Stryker or Luke Rhodes, and
Yeah, Victor Ochi.
yeah. So there's like places
Sharon.
and positions where they don't necessarily have.
I mean, I'm just shocked that they completely turned away the pass rusher position.
Yeah, no D line.
Absolutely no D tackle, no
So I'm
D
going to go
end,
another year with only one free technique.
no linebacker. Like I don't understand that, because if anyone gets hurt, by the way, Mike Jordan to the Rams,
Like,
that's a shame. But
if Sue gets hurt, there's literally no interior pass rush.
yeah, same for the linebacker core. If Misi gets hurt again, nothing. If Kiko gets hurt,
Maybe if
there's nothing. I mean, Hewitt. I mean, you're going to put Hewitt and Jenkins,
Sam,
which is fine, but that's not really. It doesn't.
it's not playing to their strengths.
Exactly. It's not how this should work. So, man,
They
like that.
probably put Paysinger at middle linebacker and then Kiko to Sam, I would guess, if Misi goes down. But then, like,
So yeah.
how quickly is Kiko going down? So yeah, and we got a kicker, Marshall Keon, the Iowa kicker. So we knew they was going to bring in some kicking competition by quite a lot of reporting. Should we move on to maybe at least to me, like the best value pick they made all draft? No, I guess Tunsil is the most value, but
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out where I had him. So I had the same grade on Thomas Duray. Is that how you pronounce it? I've already forgotten.
Duarte, something like that.
Duarte. Yeah. So I actually had the same grade as him as Carew, as like a fifth rounder. And so he's a tight end, but really he's just like a big wide receiver, a slot receiver, kind of in the ilk of Charles Clay. And he's just like really fluid athlete. So he's kind of fun. Where do you think he's just going to be like a slot receiver basically, but in like a 12 personnel, so you can kind of motion him a little bit out of the backfield and teams have to think about it, but he's not really going to do anything.
Yeah, he's definitely like a seam threat. That's really what he does. He's not like a route runner or anything like that, that's a really good as far as what Gase should do, as far as it looks like he wants to be vertical, which is good for Tannehill, and it also fits the strengths of Jordan Cameron as well. So hopefully this is viewed as like a potential replacement long term for Jordan Cameron, or even just maybe a second tight end, because his skill set fits what Cameron does well, and also what Duarte and Tannehill do. So, and I'll be back in just a minute.
Okay. And then so I guess in terms of like comparison for like an NFL player that works in the same way as Durant does, is like I guess Jordan Reed, where it's challenging the seam, and I think in a way in which he is more maybe the best ways to put it is harder to neutralize, is that he is a bit more vertically imposing and can like box out a bit better than Charles Clay was, whereas Clay was very much an on the floor player. So he couldn't really box out people. He had to catch the ball on the floor. So that's kind of somewhere where I think he really flourishes, and especially in the seams where, although he's like shorter for a tight end at like 6'2" and a bit, his hops kind of elevate him. So pretty similar. I think he tested pretty similar to Jordan Reed as well in physical traits. I think, yeah, they're both like around like 6'2"-ish, 230. So there's kind of like a physical and a play style comparison where they're pretty similar. But yeah, I thought he was a good pick, and he's been pretty productive as well. So generally, tight ends take a while to acclimate to the league. And at least with Cameron being in front of him, he's not going to be dependent on early, but he should be able to at least you've got someone with a similar skill set that you double down on. So then when Cameron's out, you're not using Dion Sims in the same way, which doesn't work because Dion Sims just can't do anything further than 12 yards down the field, or shouldn't be asked to anyway. But we'll check on, see if anything, any more undrafted free agents have joined the list. And if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them in, whether it's about any of the players or undrafted free agents they should look at. So they've also brought in Jalen Marshall, wide receiver from Ohio State. So I'll just quickly find my notes on him. It's interesting, they've clearly think that wide receiver is a pretty big need, or at least they want to have as many options as possible to start with, because they were talking up Waylon quite a bit coming into the year. So then to draft 2 wide receivers and to be already wanting to add them in free agency, and then you're picking Drake. And I mean, to be honest, like Durant is a wide receiver as well. Basically, he's a slot wide receiver. You're not really going to be using him in line at all. So they've really added a lot of pass catches. So it's going to be interesting, and maybe we're just going to have to wait a year on the defense, or they're just going to hope that a veteran defense with really only Rashad Jones as like a proven player in the back end kind of works. That'd be kind of interesting.
Okay, I'm back.
So good timing with we've got one of the first another wide receiver has joined as the UDFA. No, sorry, I was reading the Jets one. Okay, so he joined the Jets. That makes a bit more sense. Jalen Marshall has joined the Jets as free agent.
They also got looks like they got Tyvis Powell as well.
Okay,
I'm really surprised he got undrafted. Went undrafted, I should say.
What do you think of just trying to think of, they drafted 3 wide receivers basically, and then Drake, who is being drafted for pass catching, and then they have Waylon as well. Do you think they're just gonna? It's kind of interesting that they've just tried to get as many pass catches as possible. It's quite. It's almost like the opposite route you would have naturally thought they would have gone in. We thought they would take at least one, or a wide receiver and a tight end, but to go for so many pass catching options is kind of interesting. Have you got any thoughts on it at all?
It really surprised me. It just seemed like a sub package specialist draft, where they're just trying to add as many weapons but they're not. My concern there is that these aren't guys who should be on the field every down. And
if they're going to go no huddle, then how do you get them on the field?
And even if they're not, like, even if they want to go slow as molasses, I mean, my concern is that in the NFL, the more versatile you can be, the less predictable you are. When a guy like this comes onto the field, it's very easy for a defense to key in on them. And if you're not going to use them while they're on the field, it becomes a game where it's 11 on 10, and really 11 on 9 if their quarterback's not a threat. So it's that would be my concern. And Gase is a really good offensive mind, and we've seen him use very versatile pieces, even less talented than maybe even Miami got. So, can they make it happen? Can they make it work? Maybe. But I was just kind of surprised that they were so willing to take multiple people like that. I think one is fine. Duarte, I kind of view him separately. I actually really like that pick, especially in the 7th round. But as far as like the Grant and Carew, and it's just the team needed better pass catchers. So I can't sit there and say that like they're bad picks, because they're not. And it's important to be able to surround your quarterback with these types of players. I just worry about where's the upside with some of these guys. I don't see anyone here that has a potential of becoming a 3-down player. Not Carew. I'm talking about specifically Grant and Drake. Where's the 3-down impact from these guys? Because if you're just going to rotate them in, we've seen that story before. It becomes Dree Archer, who gets cut 2 years after it being a 3rd-round pick.
Yeah, and I just don't think they maybe they only had like 20 or 30 players that they thought were starting quality players, and that's why we saw the reporting today when the Dolphins should have been drafting someone in the 4th round, around the time when the pick went to Ravens to move up for Xavier Howard, and they sent out a group text to all the beat writers basically saying how they were going to take Miles Jack or Eli Apple if Tunsil didn't fall, and then they were trying to trade up to get Miles Jack at the beginning of the 2nd round. So it was an interesting kind of like news dump to...
Yeah. And just to kind of go over some of the players that were available at that time. So 107 overall was Chris Moore, wide receiver from Cincinnati. Could argue that he was a very similar version of Leonte Carew. As far as skill sets, he's not quite the route runner, but very much the deep threat, type of same vein. BJ Goodson, linebacker from Clemson, physical downhill player. Could have at least been depth, which Miami has none now at linebacker. Tyler Higbee, which was really surprising.
Yeah, you didn't think he was going to get drafted at all.
Yeah. I'm not even going to get into that because people backing up his character was very strange to me.
I mean, at least he's good. I don't know.
He's really good. Yeah, he's really good. I just, I don't like racists on my team. So, Malcolm Mitchell, that was a guy we've talked about a lot to the Patriots. He is going to be really good there. Bigger upside than Carew, much more fluid athlete. But then a little bit later on, Hassan Ridgeway, a guy that we've talked about, penetrating defensive tackle, would have been a really good value, middle of the 4th round. That really kind of ended most of like the deep DT class. Well, Willie Henry went later in the 4th round as well from Michigan. So, I mean, we saw like the deep defensive tackle class pay off. So for teams that took defensive tackles in this round, really did a nice job of waiting that out. Andrew Billings as well, who's more of like a nose. So interesting guys there. I thought that those guys could have been interesting for Miami. And then end of the round, you saw Kenneth Dixon to Louisiana Tech, or to Baltimore. And obviously Devontae Booker and yeah, so those are the kind of guys that like they missed, and Paul Perkins a little bit later in the 5th round. So like those are the guys that you could have been looking at, and so like that's the concern, is that did you miss the value on that? And I think obviously you did.
And yeah, it's just
there's a lot of good players in there. Yeah. I mean, I'm skipping over a lot of good players.
And just when you look at the depth chart, it's behind Sue at 3 technique. I have DeAndre Coleman, but then maybe he has to be the 5 technique if Mario Williams isn't playing 5 technique. And then it's Jordan Williams who should be playing, unless like magically they turn Jordan Phillips into a 3 technique, which I would assume they're trying to push him to be the nose guard that takes over from Mitchell next year. So it's just really odd. There's like, to me, that's like a huge need. And obviously you want Sue to play all the time, but you can't guarantee who's going to be healthy. And then do you change your entire defense if Sue goes down because you don't have a 3 technique anymore? It's just really odd. It was a good class for 3 techniques. At least there was times where there was good value for them. And it's just really, really odd the way they approach the front 7. I don't really mind too much about the linebackers, just because I think with there wasn't anyone really. I know people were talking about Ragland and then the Clemson linebacker that went pretty early today. But then if you're talking about Kiko Alonso being a middle linebacker, then you don't want to also then draft like a 2-down thumper or like a 1.2 down thumper to be their backup, because then you're changing your entire defense around one player going down. So you need to kind of draft comparable players at each position. Otherwise, you're just, every time someone goes down, your whole defense has to change to counter that. So to me, there wasn't really anyone that could play the middle linebacker the way that Kiko Alonso would, as basically just being like another Will. I think the William and Mary linebacker, Luke Rhodes, I still like. I think he could be kind of a versatile guy that could play at least 2 positions off ball for the Dolphins. And I don't know, maybe like a Jordan Jenkins could have been like a Sam, a Komisi replacement, but he went pretty early as well. He went day 3, didn't he?
Yeah, third round, yeah.
So I can understand why they didn't go for linebacker, just because there wasn't like great players. And I know like the fact that like every single fan mock I saw had like Scooby right in the 5th round just shows you how bad a class it was.
Yeah.
And he probably got like a sympathy draft pick in the 7th.
Well, the Browns were really interesting. I mean, for as much as people talked about analytics, all they did was just look at the stat sheet and say, who are the most productive players, and are they being undervalued for being that productive? Obviously, there was probably some studies in the house that showed that, yes, players this productive can either have staying power in the NFL or they can be decent players. But, I mean, chances are very thin that he'll do anything in the NFL just based off of his athletic profile and really his style of play. It's very reckless and grabby. He's on the ground a lot. So, he was never going to be a Dolphin just because of his athletic profile.
Should we go through some guys that are still on the board and who you'd like the Dolphins to pick, and which certain positions they should try and go for, like the group? Kind of like what we saw with linebacker last year, where you like attack a group of players. So what do you think the best position to do that is with this undrafted class?
Oh, boy, I don't know. I mean, the unfortunate thing here is that I think, as usual, the best value is going to come at the situational running back and depth at receiver.
Yeah.
And you spent 3 or 4 picks, on those players. So and that's the issue. To be honest, if you would have given me the opportunity to say, would you rather have Jay Lee undrafted or Leonte Carew for the price of 2 third-round picks and a 4th-round pick, which I think was conditional, right?
Yeah. So it's the compensatory pick. So okay. I think it's when they're saying it's conditional, what they mean is if they don't get the comp pick, then they get that 4th-round pick.
Okay. So, looking at that, I'd probably rather have taken the undrafted free agent just based off of impact on the roster and skill sets and everything and value. So I don't think that they need to continue to look at receiver. I don't think they need to continue to probably look at running back. And I'm trying to follow along with who's getting signed now, too. There's guys that I was looking at that looks like they've already committed elsewhere. I guess secondary is really where you'd look at.
Yeah, I was going to say DB, and then DB is especially the place in which I think there's still talent around. And then we've talked about how there's not really people that have their claws in the starting positions, so that could be, especially with the corners, and I think there's like at least a handful or 2 of guys that you could bring in. And then linebacker, I think there's like 4 or 5 guys that I like. I know Striker's already gone off to the Bills, so he's a guy they were looking at, like undersized Wills. He's maybe a guy you could have looked at. We've got one report that the Boise State outside linebacker Tyler Gray is signing with the Dolphins. Have you got any thoughts on him?
I do not.
So he's for Boise State. He was a 3-4, or he kind of played between most positions. So edge and like a Sam. So he could be potentially like a a Leo. His issue is like he's not going to be very good in coverage, so you probably want him to be that Leo more than a Sam for the Dolphin, just in terms of Leo's going to be pass rushing a little bit more than Sam will. And he wasn't a great tackler when I saw him. He did also play middle linebacker at some times, so they could be looking at him as kind of similar to Komisi when they try to move him into middle linebacker. So that could be kind of another plan for him. But at least we're seeing some look towards edge players. And so it'll be kind of interesting. Then he plays a lot of special teams as well for Boise State. So maybe I have to go back and watch him. But my notes just say like struggling coverage and just literally lines up everywhere.
Which that's what you'd probably expect out of an undrafted guy.
Yeah.
Especially with the amount of value in coverage quote unquote coverage linebackers, which are usually very simple tasks. So if a guy struggles on the collegiate level at those simple tasks, that's, pretty alarming.
Yeah. And he's not like a great edge rusher at all. So Luke Rhodes has gone to the Bucs, so that's a sad time for me anyway. So all the William Mary guys I was caping for have gone. Have you seen anyone else pop up, or is there any other position you think they should try and bulk buy at?
I don't think so. I mean, as far as offense is fairly set now. I'd like to see them add maybe another running back or two. I don't have any names, but defensive. I mean, I'm all for anything on defense, really. Just
in terms of running backs, I think like Jarrell Presley's still out there. I think.
No, he went to Minnesota. Yeah, that was the guy I was looking at too.
Devon Johnson or
Peyton Barber. They both went places too. It just happened so quickly, and that's why. I would just look at defense. Get as many defensive players in here as possible. We had talked about the possibility of Miami doing a heavy offensive draft, and people were shocked. They were like, "Oh, it's like no," but it would actually make sense because it's a new regime, and there's still a need for talent. Although they've put some resources in the talent, I just wish they would have taken more, or I should say, less specific talent than what they did, because ultimately, and the good news is for Miami is that they got Tunsil, and he's going to make this draft class. Like, he's the one that matters out of all this. And if Howard can become an average or even better starter, then, it's not a disaster. But outside of Tunsil, you overall, I mean, you look at this, and I think as time goes on, as the season gets closer, people will kind of step back a little bit and maybe realize again that this just wasn't a very strong performance. Kyrus Garrett went undrafted. He just went to the Panthers. So, there were good players, I think, that with higher upsides than what they took throughout the whole draft, besides, round 1, round 2. I think those picks made sense. But the rest of the draft was kind of questionable. And I'd say Duarte made sense too.
And I think just like the moving around constantly and not really getting good value, that kind of hurt them as well. And I like the player they picked. I like Howard picking him in the second, but I don't like the process they got to picking him.
Exactly, and I agree. And he was a reach for me, but I'm okay with it. I'm okay with getting your guy. I'm just not okay with way overpaying to do it
and completely misreading.
Yeah, the market. Yeah.
And it's just funny because people ripped Hickey for the way he talked in pressers, and then I haven't really seen anyone tear Greer a new one for basically saying, we thought that was going to be, we were expecting a corner run. It's just weird. Another Penn State. Oh no, sorry, that's Jordan Lucas just retweeting. Trying to see if there's any more additions. So
interesting thing that Miami did really well last year in UDFAs, and then they lost some of the position coaches. And Duffner specifically, he was a really good, known as a good recruiter.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a coincidence that
I would
Miami's
not
not
think it would be.
pulling in anybody right now.
But maybe they're just not leaking it.
It could be, yeah. And usually what'll come out too is players will change their
Yeah.
minds. They'll commit to like 3 or 4 teams, and then they'll wait until like the money actually is offered and they actually start seeing everything.
The Dolphins also had the advantage of last year's their last pick was in the 5th round.
Yeah.
So then they had 2 rounds of, and like I think the report was like Duffner was on the phone to like Hewitt and to it was Hewitt and someone else who they brought in.
Would it be Beagle?
Yeah, it must have been Vigal, and saying like he was trying to tell them, "Oh, we're going to draft you with one of these. We're going to try and draft you with one of these 5th round picks."
Mm-hmm.
So then they already had that in their mind. It's like, okay, they're trying to go after me that early, and so yeah, I think and even Luke was and Hull both talked about like Duffner being a reason why they went there. So that obviously helps having a coach that can resonate, and he was like a college coach as well, so. That probably helps as well, like knowing how to interact or connect with college players. But I'll quickly refresh and see if we've got any new news, or maybe we'll just have to leave it and we'll find out. Have to do a separate UDFA podcast later in the week, because I don't think we're going to see anything. So maybe they've shut house or agents have pushed against the Dolphins, considering they're apparently run by just one agent now. If they were run by an agent, they would have made way better deals. Well, that's what I'll say.
So overall, what's your thoughts on this draft class? Like your hot takeaway from this draft class?
I'm just looking forward to the GM getting fired. It's just really frustrating, the process we're seeing, and I just think that it's going to get to push in the media so much about, oh, we're going to get all these compensatory picks, like that's the goal in free agency, and then to sell them when they're they sold them for less than they're worth. As future picks is just ridiculous.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I had hoped had changed, because you were like, oh, okay, they actually set prices for free agents. That makes sense. Okay, they actually let go some players that they could afford to let go and replace in the draft, specifically Matthews and Vernon. I was like, okay, that looks pretty good. That seems to make sense. And then we got to the draft, and then they got maybe the biggest break in the last decade of this franchise and got one of the best prospects I've seen in Laramie Tunsil. And then everything kind of went downhill from there. And, you saw that it was all lip service for the most part. And it's nice that they collected those conditional assets with the comp picks, and then they just flushed them down the drain for a guy who probably projects at best as like a Rashard Matthews, maybe a little bit better, in terms of deep ball, ability, I should say. Whereas, Matthews didn't really have that skill set. So overall, just kind of looking at it, it could be nice. It's going to be kind of fun just to see how Gase can incorporate all of these players. I don't know how he's going to do it, because to me, it's just a bunch of guys who's going to get like 10 or 15 snaps a game. And that's not really worth anything more than like a late round pick, which Grant was. So that's fine. But Duarte, I think he could be probably the best long-term pick outside of Tunsil and maybe Howard. So that I'm excited about, but I'm not excited about kind of their complete mindset towards the defense, that the defense was set. The offense is going to be better next year.
I think it's bad when you like I like 4 players and 2 of them were 7th round picks.
I
like 2 players for where they were taken. And, that's
and to get completely dominated in trades That's another thing. I mean, I don't want to overreact by sitting here saying, Tannenbaum. This is bad though. I mean, I'll say this. This was really bad. It was a bad free agency period. They didn't properly value their own in-house free agent, and then they go to replace him with someone that cost a higher draft pick. There was one running back drafted in between Kenyon Drake at number 73 and Kenneth Dixon at number, 143? And that was CJ Procise.
Yeah.
That's it. They completely missed. Like, they missed badly on the cornerback. I can give them the benefit of the doubt and said, okay, they felt they got the best cover 2 corner. That kind of makes sense to me because especially with Kendall Fuller's injury, you don't know where that kind of stands. Okay, that makes sense at least. But then the running back thing is so poorly done. And we knew, and we talked about this entering the weekend, you can wait till day 3 to get it back because it happens every single year that really good backs fall to 4th, 5th, 6th round.
Yeah, and you flourished from that last year. You're like reaping the rewards from it, yet then you don't remember how that process happened before.
Right. Yeah. So just overall, disappointed. I was hoping that Tannenbaum would show more.
If they didn't vine their way into Tunsil.
Yeah, it was probably going to be Miles Jack, which people would have really liked, but
it would have its own issues.
This could have been maybe like a historically bad draft if that would have happened, depending on Jack's knee health. I'm knocking my hand against wood here as I say this, but had he been hurt, if he gets hurt, if he was a Dolphin and got hurt as a rookie, this could have been literally one of the worst drafts in franchise history. Now it's not going to happen like that because Tunsil is an incredible player, but yeah, just not good. And if it's a rough year, I do hope that you're kind of right with where you're feeling that Tannenbaum is on the hot seat because he's been selling win, win, win. We're going to win right now, and hopefully, Stephen Ross can smell through that bullshit if this team doesn't do well. And I don't think that they will do overly well. I think the offense will be a lot better, but there's no reason to believe the defense will be better. They didn't upgrade any spot except for maybe free safety. So, yeah, I don't know how anyone could have any confidence in this front office and also the coach, not necessarily coaching staff, but the talent that the coaching staff has to work with.
We've got one UDFA in, and that's Maryland's AJ Hendy. So he played safety for them primarily. He had I think he was suspended, maybe it was 2 years ago. So maybe that's one reason he didn't get drafted. I thought he was kind of like an average kind of cover safety. Fits better in his own scheme than anything else. Did you watch him much at all?
No, can't say I did, unfortunately.
So I think he's just going to be like a body. Again, he fits kind of like the size criteria we're looking at. Defensive backs around 6 foot at 210. Not a great. Let me just check my numbers. Yeah, 4.6 40, so not great. Speed, which was something that, at least with the last set of coaching staff and front office, they really liked long, tall, fast safeties. So he's at least half of that. Have you seen any other guys come through, or should we wrap it up and more?
That's all I've seen. We've got a long couple months now until the season starts. So I'll be looking at cornerbacks this summer and starting to look towards 2017 draft.
We'll probably do kind of more in-depth podcasts on each of the players picked. And have more kind of like thoughts maybe on like each position room, and obviously we'll do weekly podcasts. But thanks for listening, and we'll have like an undrafted free agent podcast, as we've not seen as many names come in as we normally do this time. So whether the Dolphins are trying to pull something out of the hat or they've just gone radio silent. We'll find out. Maybe they'll have a group text next time they're on the. They should next year when they should be making compensatory picks. But anyway, thanks for listening, and make sure you follow Ian at NFL Film Study and read his work at Bleach Report and draftcentric.weebly.com. You can follow the show at MiamiPod, themiamipod.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean. And that's it. Thanks for joining us these last 3 days. And it could be worse. Tunsil could have not smoked. He could have just smoked out of a regular bong.
Yep, and you could be the Jets, who have a quarterback depth chart of Christian Hackenberg, Geno Smith, and Bryce Petty. At least Miami fans don't have to watch that every week.
I mean, at least they're not pretending that Bryce Petty can challenge.
Legitimate, yeah.
So, Hack's better than Petty. Tyler Johnson's gone to Chargers. That's cool for the
nice.
Oregon tackle that's had real awful injury stuff. So that's nice for him.
Yeah.
But anyway, just follow us and we'll tweet out any of these people we see and thoughts with them. But thanks again for listening to us over the draft. It's all over now, the funnest time of the year. Normally filled with optimism and then torn away from you. Like all the draft picks have been torn away from the cold, dead hands of Chris Greer. And we won't see him again as well for we may never hear of Greer again, to be honest. We could see everyone get fired, but we definitely won't hear of him until next year's free agency, because now Baum takes all the credit. But anyway, goodbye.